Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Green Man channel. I hope you're all good and well. So this is now the final episode, I'm sad to say, of Dark Horse Discs. This is the 14th episode, and it's been great to have a series with guests. And we have our most regular guests with us to finish this episode, as we did with the first episode when we talked about Death Magnetic by Metallica. And we're finishing by talking about Train of Thought by Dream Theater. So I'm joined again by Hector, Chill Dudes on a Couch Reviews, and John from JC Rocker Metal Reviews. How are you both doing today?
Doing good.
Pretty good, man.
Doing good, ready for the final. We're ending on a high with Dream Theater, and this album, I think in particular, is a good one. The Train of Thought to finish on. So we're going to do the usual format with this, and I actually usually say when this came out as well. This was released back in 2003, actually on the 11th of November, which means it's near it's just past its 19th birthday. So that's also another interesting thing, just which is by chance. I didn't pick it for that reason. It just so happens to have just gone past its anniversary.
No, yeah, I saw it, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, this is turning 19.
Yeah. It's just in its last year of being a teenager. So we're going to start, as we always do, with this format of recalling or recounting our first experience with the album and why we think it's a dark horse. Then the second time around, we do our 3 favorite tracks, and the last time around, we say where we think it ranks. So this week, we're going to start with John with JC Rocker Meta Reviews and your sort of first memories and why you think it's a bit of a dark horse.
Okay. So with Dream Theater, I knew about them, when they came out with Pull Me Under and Images and Words, but after that, I didn't really get into them too much. Later on, they released this compilation called Their Greatest Hit and 20 Other Songs or something like that. It was like a compilation, and one of the songs was going to be like one of my top threes, and that was on that album. And that kind of like got me interested in checking out the other albums. I think the first thing that drew me to this album was the album cover. It just very like haunting. It's dark. Yeah, hold it up, because it's like this forest, there's bats, they're like looking through this tunnel, and there's like this eye coming out of the ground. And if you didn't know, you might think this is like some kind of like black metal album or something darker, but that really got me interested in this album. And why is it a Dark Horse album? Because it's heavier, it's darker. Dream Theater, they're kind of like this prog band, and they're very like upbeat and lively, and more, I guess, fantasy oriented. But this is darker. It was heavier. They say Dream Theater was one of those bands where they took like the 70s prog and they mixed it with more like modern metal. And I think they wanted to go more on the metal side instead of like the prog side. But I mean, it's still prog. You got the long songs. I mean, the album, it's 7 songs, 70 minutes about. So I mean, it's still long, but I think it's just their heaviest album. And I think if you are looking for more metal, more heaviness, and maybe less of like that, like proggy stuff, I think this is really a good album. So that's what I think. That's why I think it's a dark horse. Yeah.
Nice.
Yes.
So now to me, first of all, I want to thank you for not picking The Astonishing. Because if you'd have picked that, I'm like, okay, I'm out. I'm not going to listen to The Astonishing.
I will reveal I was also tempted by Black Clouds and Silver Linings, because I like that quite a lot as a bit of a
That
dark.
one's good. It's just
another one
that
I like
one.
as well. Yeah. I think that was the last Mike Portnoy album, I think.
Yeah.
I think so too. So
Yeah.
this album came back in 2003. I'm sorry, Tom, but I always have like the dirty stories of albums. Like you try to keep it PG, and then I have the sleazy story. So when this album came out, I was dating this girl, and she was an infomaniac, and she loved Dream. JC's laughing. She loved Rammstein and Dream Theater, and that was when this album came out. And she would say like, "Oh, let's have like a quickie," and then she put Dream Theater. I'm like, "That's not a quickie. That's like a hour and 10 minutes of music." So I
Yeah,
remember
that's
that
going to
album.
be a challenge.
I remember that album because I listened to Dream Theater before, but back then because she listened to the Dream Theater a lot, I got to get more into them because she listened to them so much, and obviously she made me listen to them. So that album in particular,
I'm
I
kind of
think it's a
impressed you found someone into Dream Theater, actually.
you
Alive.
never known someone that's into, well, this girl,
Well,
uh yeah, she
yeah.
was really into Dream Theater. So yeah, no, that's because I was like a more of a casual listener, but after that, like, I got to appreciate them more. So this album to me is a dark horse. First of all, I like that this album is one of their heaviest albums. Just like when you see the cover, like you said,
Mm,
it's
yeah.
more, it looks more menacing.
Darker. Yeah.
And they probably, the band probably told James Labrie like, no, dude, no more ballads. But there's like this one ballad in the album, Bacon, which is like 2 minutes, but that's it. That's all they gave James Labrie to do the ballad because he loves his ballads. But this album is heavy. There's prog in it, but like JC said, I agree. It's more of it's their most like heavy metal, like I think to this day this is their hardest album, like their most metal album. And I enjoyed it because like at that time I was really into like Lamb of God and heavier music. So I like that Dream Theater went heavy on this album. And maybe I think it's overlooked because they've had so much albums. And I think a lot of people with the Pull Me Unders and the albums from the 90s, they have it in such high regards that I think at that time in the 2000s, I think it's when it started cool to make fun of Dream Theater.
Mm.
Because you had the jokes like the long solos, and people were made fun like, oh yeah, they're great musicians, but like the songs have like no feeling sometimes. So I think it was cool to start to make fun of them at that moment because maybe some jealousy because I think they're one of the, if not the one of the most like successful prog bands of all time,
Mm.
and that's why I think it's a dark horse album.
Yeah, I mean, I first discovered Dream Theater when I was in my, what I always call my prog phase, which started in the late 2000s, went on for a few years, and obviously I love prog permanently. But this album was one I didn't discover as one of my first experiences with Dream Theater. So I kind of got into, I think, Awake first because, like I said, in my top 40 songs, it was Lifting Shadows Off a Dream that got me into Dream Theater, which is one of their slower, more big kind of epic ballad type tracks. I guess that one. I really like that one. And that kind of got me into Dream Theater. And then after Awake, I started to listen to more of the other albums, but it was actually probably like 2011, 2012 before I got to this one. And I liked it a lot. I liked the heaviness of it. It made me think, well, I tried to work out why. I wonder why they took this route. And I've read online it was something to do with fans wanting, actually reacting well to some heavy stuff they played live, apparently. And I also wondered if it was the impact of the really heavy sound, the heavy stuff that was coming out in the early 2000s and the influence of groove metal and all that sort of thing, whether that had a bit of a bearing on their decision to take a heavier path maybe with this album. I also think it doesn't come after, well, it's 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence was before this one, I think. And then before that, you had probably my favorite, which is the Scenes from Memory Metropolis Part 2 album, which is, I think, a great album. And then obviously everyone talks about Images and Words. I mean, I'm not that blown away by that. We'll get into that later, but I'm not that big on Images and Words, which is kind of sounds sacrilegious as the Dream Theater fans say, but yeah. So I think it's a dark horse. Really, I kind of think I was sort of touching on it there, just because it's it's a different style of album, and it's probably their iconic albums had already been by this point. But I think I've seen other YouTubers actually rate this album pretty highly. One YouTuber particular that's here, JC. So I think it's quite well liked generally, but it's not their sort of one of their classic sounding albums. So I think it maybe is thought of as dark horse. for that reason. So we'll start on our favorite track. We've got our favorite tracks next. So JC, do you want to go for your 3 favorites?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so my 3, uh, the obvious one, but it's As I Am. This was the one that I was talking about, where the first song I heard that was on that compilation album.
Yeah.
And it's just very dark, heavy, sludgy. That's like the word I'll use for it. Has those like deep like string bends,
Yeah.
and just that has that heavy gallop, and it's definitely a long song. James LaBrie, he's the kind of singer. He does mostly like more like those high, like almost like power metal style vocals, but he kind of like tries to like take it down, tries to sound like a little darker on this one. And really great song. My number 2 is going to be Stream of Consciousness. This is the instrumental, but even though it's instrumental, I mean, it doesn't need vocals. It's just a really great song. I can compare this one to, I guess, like Metallica's like Orion. It kind of has some similarity to that, and it's just one of the songs. Just this is like probably like more on like the proggy side, but it's still very heavy. You got the keyboards, but like the guitars are still like up in the front, and it just lots of changes. You got lots of guitar shredding, lots of solos. They have like some piano there, but there's a lot of stuff going on. That's why I like that song. And my number 3 pick is going to be In the Name of God. And another long song. It has those like sludgy guitars that kind of do some of those like Middle Eastern sounds in it. But I think this one is a little more thrash and like groove oriented. And the lyrics are very good, talking about, I guess similar to like Megadeth's Holy Wars, violence in the name of God and wars and those types of topics. It just lots of heavy riffs. It's a long song. I mean, there's some quiet parts, but you can hear the instruments very well. The song kind of has like ups and downs, kind of, gets slower some points, faster. Like I said, it's a long song. But it's just heavy riffs, and it's just, very great vocals, and just that's my number 3. That's why I like the song.
Cool.
Nice.
Excellent.
So so for my songs, As I Am is also in my top 3 songs of this album. It's just a great album opener, and James LaBrie sounds more pissed on this track, which is good. Like, I'm like, thank you, James, like, for like growing some balls and sounding pissed, because usually he's more like on the like safe side, like more like he said power, like JC said, more power metal. But yeah, this track is great. The guitar riffing on it is great. So that's just when you listen to that first track, you're like, okay, this is a different type of Dream Theater album. And the other 2 that I'm gonna pick are different. I'm gonna pick This Dying Soul, and I love that this song, James doesn't start singing until the 2-minute mark. Like the first minute, it's like a build up. There's like guitar solos, the drumming is great, and then it slows down and James starts singing, and I think it's a great epic track. And finally, I like Honor Thy Father.
Yeah.
And on that one, it starts like with some great drumming for Mike Portnoy, and the riffing here, there's like a little bit of thrash metal in that song with the mixed with the prog, and that's why I like it, because it's like unexpected to have, because usually Dream Theater doesn't start a song like so heavy, and on this album they almost start all the songs heavy. So I think that's another standout track. So those 3 tracks are great, but the only track from this album that I would say it goes into like oh yeah, the safe side is that Bacon, which is a 2-minute ballad that I think the band just gave it to James LaBrie so he would shut the fuck up and stop complaining. I'm like, yeah, here you have your 2-minute ballad, James.
Do you know why though that he did that song? Because actually I think his daughter was very unwell or went into a coma or something. So
oh my God, now I feel like shit.
He was really emotional. So
oh, I'm sorry, Dream Theater fans, I didn't know that. But yeah, that's the weakest track on the record.
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree though. I think it's it's a strange one to have there with all the heaviness of the album and stuff. It
Yeah,
kind
maybe
of
that could have gone
needs to be.
in some of his solo material.
Yeah, maybe, or as maybe a bonus track or something like that. I didn't think
Yeah.
personally that was necessarily a bad song, but on this
No,
album,
it's not a bad song,
yeah,
but it feels like misplaced in this album.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's if this placement's a little bit odd, maybe. So yeah, my three favorites. I think yeah. So we've all chosen "As I Am." That's a great track. Really heavy opening track. John Petrucci's rhythms on this album are really great. I mean, you know, when I often think of John Petrucci, I think of his crazy solo work all over the neck of the guitar, and he's technically perfect in the way he plays and everything. But he has some great riffs on him, and he proves that on this album that he can do metal really well, I think. And I wouldn't mind a Dream Theater album that was like this, with heavy all the way through, but maybe even a bit more condensed. And I think you'd have an album even better than Train of Thought, I think. But yeah, so one of my favorite tracks is "As I Am." What's the other ones? "Endless Sacrifice." Did either of you say "Endless Sacrifice"?
No, but I'm not sure if JC did. I think no.
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I didn't. No, it's
yeah. I really like that track. I think that's you know, again, it's quite a long one for what it is, but I think James sounds great. Like Hector was saying, he sounds a bit darker and you know, with the heavy sound. And I think he sounds really good on this album, pretty much throughout the whole thing. And yeah, it's sort of just the Petrucci guitaring is good on here as well. I think he does some good key changes and stuff, and I really like a lot of his. I've already mentioned his, so I've gone on about John Petrucci a lot already, but yeah, I like his various riffs on that song in particular as well. And I do think it's a really good chorus on "Endless Sacrifice." So that kind of on my early listens to this album, "Endless Sacrifice" was the track I kept going back to. And so I think that's probably my favorite on the whole album as well, besides "As I Am." My third pick is "Honor Thy Father," which I think I agree that's a great song too. And actually, you know, the sort of that middle section of the song where it's that riff repeating slightly different ways, it's like really heavy, made me think a bit of "Between the Buried and Me" and how the way they do their songs is like this version of Dream Theater. You know what I mean? That you can tell "Between the Buried and Me," I think, has drawn inspiration from a lot of progressive bands. But for me, when Dream Theater, this version of Dream Theater on this album, I think sounds a little like how "Between the Buried and Me" started to sound when they, you know, when they were sort of doing more of their more progressive. They started off, you know, like kind of metalcore, deathcore style, I think, not deathcore, metalcore, but they got progressively more into progressive metal and stuff. And I've started to think, I wonder how much influence Dream Theater, "Between the Buried and Me" drew from Dream Theater, and probably quite a bit, I imagine. But
A lot. I actually saw
yeah,
them opening for Dream Theater in Puerto Rico
okay,
when
yeah,
they were a newer band. So they were on tour with them. And I'm sorry to say now that they have surpassed Dream Theater
oh
by a
yeah,
lot.
I probably agree with that. They've got a, I think their discography is pretty much almost flawless, "Between the Buried and Me," if not
Oh,
flawless.
I've seen them live 2 times.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen them once, but yeah, they're amazing. So where have we got to now? Last
Oh,
episode, and it's it. So that was our favorite track. So we're now going to rank where we think this one would come in the Dream Theater discography. So JC, where would you put this one in a ranking?
yeah, I did a Dream Theater ranking video last year, and I had this one high. I think I had it at number 3 because my number 1 is Awake, and then I
Yeah,
had a
that's a
Metropolis
great
Part 2
album.
Scenes from Memory,
Yeah,
and then I had this one, Train of Thought, and then my 4 was the Images and Words, which I like, but I don't think it's like their greatest album. But I like this one because it's the heavy album, you know, and you know sometimes with these Dream Theater albums, they're long, they're progressive. I think this one stands out, out of the entire discography. Like this is their heavy album.
yeah,
So so I guess that's why. So that's why I have it up high. It's just well, one I was like just like it's just the darkness, the heaviness, and it's just very different. So That's why. So I have it at number 3.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Nice. So yeah, I'm reading here with stuff about the album. Like, yeah, it was inspired because they were on tour and they wanted the heavier stuff.
Yeah.
And I read about I'm so sorry, Dream Theater fans. I didn't know that the Bacon song was about his daughter going in a coma. Now I feel terrible. But yes, maybe that album was also darker because if James Labrie was experiencing that, maybe that's why also influenced maybe the darkness of the record, because having your daughter in a coma, that's terrible thing. And also I read here that like the beginning of the album note, it's the note that was in their previous album, and they followed it for this track. So that's interesting. So Dream Theater, I'm a fan, but like for me to rank them, like it would be hard because I haven't like been listening to all the albums constant, but I like the first ones. I think of the ones into the 2000s. I think Train of Thought is their stronger album. And obviously the last albums of they've been okay, but obviously nothing will be as bad as The Astonishing. But yeah, I would say Train of Thought is a super solid album. That how many albums do they have? Because they have a lot of albums.
I'm inclined to say
I have
16 or 17, 16.
I just counted 15. I'm looking at their list.
15. So yeah,
15.
I think out of the ones in the 2000s, this is the one that I enjoy the most. So I would rank it like in the top 5 of Dream Theater albums.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good album as well. And I'd rank it probably in my top 5 to 4th or 5th, I'd say. I am thinking of doing a tier list for Dream Theater at some point, so I might not reveal every single placement that I would have the albums in, so as not to spoil it. But yeah, I think I would have this one 4th or 5th because there are 3 or 4 albums of theirs that I really love, and the rest could I could switch around quite a bit in terms of how I rate it. I will say an album I liked from them that came out pretty recently was Distance Over Time. I loved that. I really enjoyed that. I thought it kind of brought back a bit of their classic sound. They didn't get super lost in technical, guitar and keyboard and drum wizardry on that album. It was kept a little bit more of familiar song structures, but I liked it for that. And I liked Distance Over Time a lot because it was almost a bit more, slightly more of an accessible Dream Theater album compared to a lot of their others, I thought. So
I agree. That one was more late and shorter album as well.
Shorter album that was.
And you know why? Because it came after The Astonishing.
Yeah.
So Distance Over Time probably is their answer to, okay, we got it. You hated The Astonishing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, I think that's a wrap. I think we're at the end. So for a Dream Theater video, it should probably be like 2 hours, shouldn't it? But to be appropriate to Dream Theater, but I think we've done well. We've done a Dream Theater discussion in less than half an hour. So anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks Hector, Children on Couch Reviews, for your guest spots on this series, and John Jesse Rockametz Reviews as well, for all your guest contributions to this. I've really enjoyed doing this. It's been a lot of fun. I know these have mostly been my picks, with the exception of the Pearl Jam and Queensryche. So I'm really grateful to you both for coming along to all of these and filling in every weekend. Also want to mention and shout out Josh Keach for his spot as well on Joe Satriani's video, and Mary Loves Music when she featured for the Porcupine Tree video when we did Light Bulb's Son as well. So I think we're going to finish things there, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Hector's channel, Children on Couch Reviews, for all the Rockametz reviews and the interviews on that channel as well. It's really worth checking out his channel, and obviously JC Rockametz Reviews, John, for his comprehensive coverage, as I always say, for your album reviews and rankings, and always interesting takes on all the albums you talk about. And my channel is very similar, with a bit of a sci-fi, horror, and fantasy science. So don't forget to drop me a sub as well. Otherwise, thanks all for following the series. If you've been following, it's sad to say goodbye to it, but really appreciate all the followers of the series. So from me, from the guests, one last time for this series for now. Bye for now.
Bye.